Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from the Riverside Theatre production of Native Gardens. Say hi to Franco, Machado-Pesce. Franco, welcome.
Hi, how are you doing? Pleasure to be here.
And Kirsten Brooks.
Hi, Dennis.
Nice to have you both here. I have read a little bit about this play, and I'm real excited to learn more about it. Kirsten, let's start with you. You direct the show. Give me the back of the paperback summary of what it's about.
Yes, Native Gardens by Karen Zacharías is a show about two neighboring families, the Butleys and the Del Valles, and they live in the D.C. area. The Butleys are long-established DC residents, and the Del Valles are new to the neighborhood, have a fixer-upper, very excited about it. They decide to hold a party for Pablo's law firm, and in the process of doing so and fixing up their yard and building a new fence, discovered that there's a slight issue with the property line.
Oh.
And there are words had over a fence, and things quickly escalate, or shall I say devolve, into madness and chainsaws and thrown acorns.
That's the first time madness, chainsaws, and thrown acorns has ever been uttered on this show, so there's a first right there. Now, we should say two things about this before we get too much further on. First off, it is the 300th production of Riverside Theatre, which is a great anniversary, and partly in honor of that and partly because they are awesome. The neighbor couple is played by Ron Clark and Jody Hovland, the founders of Riverside Theatre.
Yes, that is correct.
Kirsten, how long have you been in the area? Do you have a history? Do you know Ron and Jody from before or anything like that, or is this your first time working with them?
This is the first time that I've worked with them. Of course, I know them by reputation. I have been in the area for about 10 years, but I've been involved with Riverside since 2023 with the production of Fefu and Her Friends was my first interaction with them. And yes, they are legend. Ron and Jody. Everyone knows them, everyone loves them, and for good reason. They're wonderful to work with, wonderful people. So,
Franco, you live in New York, yes?
Yes, I do.
So tell me just a little bit about your life and career before you came to, before this.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Venezuela, and then I grew up all over the Midwest in Chicago and Michigan, and then I went to college in Southern California. And then I moved to New York after the pandemic to continue pursuing theater and developing as an actor. And then ultimately found my way into this production of Native Gardens. And luckily, I'm very acquainted with Iowa City because I have a lot of family here. So when I was in Michigan, we would celebrate a lot of holidays together back and forth. Love this place, love this community. It's very inspiring.
How did it come that you came from New York to Iowa City?
Yeah, I mean, I was just on Backstage.com, which is just a platform where a lot of auditions are posted. And I saw that they were casting Kirat Troy, actually. And I auditioned for Kirat Troy, and that's how I met Adam. And then through Adam, he introduced me to Kirsten. And then I auditioned for Native Gardens, and then the rest is history.
This takes place across the property line.
Yes.
But this is also a unique opportunity for the audience to be really intimate and close to the show.
Yeah, so Franco mentioned the Kirat Troy, which was the previous show that Riverside did just before this, and that was the first time that Riverside had set up a 3/4 thrust in their current space on the Ped Mall in Iowa City. So the audience is sitting on three sides of the action, and we have that same configuration, but anyone who got the opportunity to see Kirat Troy will be pretty astonished, I think, at the transformation from that show into this. You are literally in the backyards of these two families. And there are trees, there is mulch, there is dirt, there are so many flowers. It's really lovely and special, and you get this sense of intimacy with the families and the action that's going on.
With the 3/4 thrust, or almost theater in the round, nearly round, that presents both challenges and opportunities from an acting perspective.
Yes.
Because we're always taught as young actors, never turn your back to the audience.
Right.
You don't have to worry about that when your back is just going to be turned to some of the audience some of the time.
Exactly. And Kirsten's been such a fantastic director because there's been moments where the worry is now being on the same plane. As much as possible, we have to be aware of our positioning to make sure that for all three angles of the audience, we can show as much as possible. And that usually maybe includes having different levels of where we are on the stage or being in diagonal lines. There's a lot of points of views that come across.
And of course, you mentioned actual real live soil on
Yes.
stage. Does that create issues for the costumer in terms of having to clean the costumes more thoroughly?
No, it was a topic that came up in the production meetings for sure, but the dirt does not become an issue too much for the costumer. We have a couple of fabulous ensemble members. We mentioned Ron and Jody and Franco, of course. We also have Jessica Murillo Kemp, who's playing Pablo's wife, Tania del Valle. And we have two fantastic ensemble members, Ariana Martinez and Nathaniel Payan, who are playing a variety of roles, including the landscapers. And they are the heart and soul of these gardens. And
They get a little dirty.
They get a little dirty. Yes. And they have a lot of hard work that they're doing throughout this show. And I always, when reading this, was interested in how we've got actually like three families. We've got the Butleys, as played by Ron and Jody. We've got the Del Valles, played by Franco and Jess. And then we've got the Gomez family, where the landscapers who come in and make all of this happen. So that's been really interesting to see. And yes, their costumes do have to get washed.
Madness, chainsaws, and throwing acorns. Obviously, there's a lot of comedy in the show. Do you describe it as a comedy or?
Yeah, it's definitely a comedy, somewhere between a situational comedy and a satire. It's not a farce per se, except perhaps in the last scene with the chainsaw and the acorns. But there's a lot of sort of timely and relevant comedies that we recognize, situations that we see in ourselves and our neighbors and our world that we can watch reflected in what's going on with these characters. And some of the lines that Karen has written and the way that they're delivered by the actors are just in and of themselves hilarious, and some of them have a little bit more of a
little bit of a
edge
bite
to them.
Yeah.
A little bite, just a little.
We are seeing in society a little bit of a generational divide
Yes.
between the boomers and millennials, Gen Z, however you want to define that, in a way that to those of us who, are boomer or boomer adjacent, always thought, oh my gosh, I'll never be the stick in the mud old person who can't be flexible. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess that comes into play here as well.
It does a bit, and it's funny. I wonder if you're laughing because Pablo, the character of Pablo, actually has a line almost exactly
Literally.
to that effect.
Yeah, where
Okay, boomer.
he's just pondering, will we be like that when we get their age? And there's a lot of nuance in that line that gets explored throughout the whole piece, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
What has changed for either and both of you between reading the play the first time and then starting to see it come together? You first, Franco.
Yeah, I mean, when you first read the play, it can read very much like a Dick Van Dyke sitcom, I Love Lucy. And so you're immediately thrust into this world where lines feel very potentially calculated, jokes feel very obvious. But then when you're exploring it and you're acting it out, there's jokes that come up that weren't obvious before. And you find a naturalism in the elevated language or in the elevated situations that really make the piece relevant and easier to connect with. Mm-hmm. And also you get a grander understanding for this concept of not judging characters, especially as an actor. Your mission is not to judge your character, whether it's in a good way or in a bad way. And when you fully dive into the piece with other actors, you start realizing from an outside perspective, oh, everybody has a point of view that's correct in this piece. And I think when you read it at first glance, your biases come in and you pick a side. Mm-hmm. And every time I do the show now, I find myself jumping back and forth of everybody's right at different points, and it's all about who's listening at what point, who's choosing not to listen.
Everyone is the hero of their own story.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Kirsten, same question. What has changed? What has changed for you as the play's developed?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is very similar to what Franco said. Like in the script, in the So at the beginning of a script, a playwright will often have a list of the characters and a brief description of each of them before you get to the actual text. And Karen, in her script, describes each of these characters with the first two words of each one's description is smart, likable. And then it goes on to describe them in further detail. And there are numerous places throughout the dialogue where they say, we are good people, we're good and decent people, they are decent people. And as we have been developing the play from the table, just finding how the comedy, which on the page feels much more sitcom and much more like it wants to be, in some places. But in actual fact, in order for the audience to identify with all of these characters and be able to see that, oh yeah, they do all have their foibles and their strengths, and it's a matter of whether or not they're able to actually connect or able to actually listen to each other in the long run. It's not that they're right and they're wrong. End of story.
Everybody is smart and likable, then why can't they get along?
Right. What is it that prevents us from actually being able to live with our neighbors?
The show is Native Gardens, running through March 16th at Riverside Theatre in Iowa City. riversidetheatre.org if you'd like tickets. Sounds like a lot of fun. Franco, welcome to Iowa. Glad to have you here for this. Thanks again for being here today, and I hope the run goes really well for you.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
You can hear The Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:30, on demand at kcck.org/culture, or subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Watch our videos on the KCCK Facebook and YouTube channels. Our producer is Lydia Kilgore. The Culture Crawl theme is composed by Vivian Shanley. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.